Hi, everybody. Today we're talking about chapter 10 of our textbook on small group communication. And the topic is relational communication among small group members. In 1999, Keaton named 3 reasons for studying relational aspects of small group communication. First, she mentioned that many groups, such as primary, social, or self-help, center around the interpersonal aspects of group communication. In other words, we spend time with our families, our friends, just for the purpose of enjoyment. So the relationships, the interpersonal communication in those groups, they are the primary motive. Second, relational issues are saturating every task or decision-making process that the group performs. So it's everywhere. Relationships are everywhere. And third, group members have relationships with one another, and if there is tension, it affects others. If there is happiness or humor between 2 members, it just saturates the others as well. So those relations are interdependent. And from a group perspective, the interpersonal communication between group members spreads out to the rest of the group, and the other pairs or other individuals, they also feel affected by the dynamic between any group members. So we will study interpersonal relational communication because it does have a strong impact on the group communication itself. We will also look at different types of communication, such as verbal, nonverbal, and listening, which is also a way of communicating. The relational communication is defined as verbal and nonverbal messages that create the social fabric of a group by promoting relationships between and among members. This is again from the same scholar, Keaton, 1999, and it is a quote from page 192, actually. Listening is another aspect of communication. It's another way of communicating, so we will discuss listening as part of the social fabric of any group. Verbal communication is defined as words and phrases that group members use to create meaning and communicate that meaning. Nonverbal communication, obviously, it's all communication that is not words or phrases, but includes other types of sharing messages and creating meaning. So, in other words, nonverbal communication is everything but words. Gestures, even appearance, clothing, hair, those things can be, even your perfume can be considered nonverbal communication. So the characteristics of verbal communication are denotative, which means the literal meaning of a word or phrase, because in verbal communication we said we're using words and phrases. So denotative is the dictionary meaning, literal meaning of a word or a phrase, and connotative, which signifies the personal perception of any individual using the term or receiving the message from another individual. So the sender of the message and the receiver of the message may interpret the message differently. For example, if I say dog and you hear dog, we may have different perceptions of that pet. I will be thinking about the dogs that I know, the small dog that lives next to me, the small white dog, or you can imagine a German Shepherd because your family may own a German Shepherd, or you may have grown up with a large dog. So our perceptions of the word dog, our understanding of the same verbal message may be slightly different, but we do agree on the standard, on the abstract meaning of the word dog. So in that sense, it is the same, it is uniform. That's why it is verbal communication. So I use the word abstract and I want to expand, add to this concept um, the notion of concrete meaning. Meanings can be concrete or abstract. There are concepts that we say, like bread or a computer or an apple. These are concrete words. Abstract communication is anything that's like philosophy, like mathematics, like physics. Physics can be more concrete, but again, for a lot of people and a lot of advanced physics is very abstract. So, what is concrete? It is something that has identifiable reference, an object or a notion that makes the meaning clear. As I said, apple, computer, a table, the meaning is pretty clear behind these words. Abstract ideas, there is no identifiable referent, the meaning is less clear. I could say contempt, or hate, or expectation. So these are abstract notions because expectation, for instance, can mean a lot of things. High expectations of a person, or expecting a bus, or expecting a baby. So it is so abstract that you can find matches to the meaning that are from different realms. So abstractions are less clear, they need more explaining. Verbal communication can use a restricted code or an elaborate code. By code, we mean language or a collection of symbols. Any code is something that needs to be deciphered. It is a message in which the meaning is not obvious. So the restricted code could be simple, conventional, short language. Elaborate codes are, we can say, jargon, slang that is not widespread, regional dialect, or a jargon of a profession. For example, medical terminology is a code that's not obvious to the outside lay observer, but for a professional, it works because they're familiar with the concepts. And I should say that, as always, at the beginning of the chapter, there is a very elaborate case study. There is an example that you can read, and you should read, in order to be able to differentiate the codes, the elaborate and restricted codes. For example, there is a word I want to say, it relates to fruits and vegetables. That's a combination of these two objects or types of objects, and it is a coded word which you and I may not know, but the participants of this case, the characters, they're familiar with it. So a code is a message in which the meaning is not on the surface, it's not obvious, it needs to be deciphered. So verbal communication is based on codes, and language is a code. Our common language is a simple, conventional, that is restricted code. Any professional lingo, professional jargon, or um, a limited language between a small group of people, insider jokes, that those can be seen as elaborate codes. So the codes of nonverbal communication. Let's move on to nonverbal. Nonverbal is everything but words. They have 7 different forms. So those forms are personal appearance, kinesics, which is movements, oculesics, which is the motions of the eye, the expression of the eye, facial expression in general, facial muscles working, proxemics, that is the closeness or distance, haptic, it is the touch aspect, and vocalics. There have been cases, I bet you can remember, when someone is saying something really, really interesting, but the voice of that individual is so annoying that you cannot listen to the message. So that is the work of vocalics. Aside from these primary codes, there are nonverbal codes that we call secondary because they don't emerge, they don't appear, they don't exist until they come up for some reason or other. And those are the sense of smell, olfactics, the smell, and chronemics, the use of time. So the smell of a person using perfume or the odors, or a baby smells like milk, or a baby smells like a dirty diaper, that's a message, that's a nonverbal sign that the diaper needs to be changed. Chronemics is the use of time, and it only comes up when a person knows that time is limited, or the opposite, that you need to kill time. So it only comes up when necessary. And finally, the last part of our conversation is about listening, which is defined as the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and on nonverbal messages. And that is a definition from the International Listening Association. Washington Post reporter Don Oldenburg has conducted a poll, a survey in 2001, and calculated that 85% of what we know is coming from listening. 45% of our day is spent listening, and 75% of our time listening is plagued by distractions, preoccupations, and forgetfulness. In small group communication, the essential types of listening include discriminative, appreciative, emphatic, comprehensive, and evaluative. And those definitions are obvious. Discriminative is differentiating among stimuli, appreciative, enjoyment, emphatic, understand how someone feels, comprehensive, to understand information, evaluative, to check something against criteria. So there are listeners who are people-oriented. They're thinking about the other person's emotions. There are listeners who are action-oriented. They are looking for precise, concise action messages. Content-oriented listeners, they like challenging, complicated information. They enjoy complex things. So they would enjoy a lecture, for example. And time-oriented listeners measure interactions by telling the other person about the time that they have available for that interaction. So once again, what is listening? The process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and or nonverbal messages. That is the definition of listening. And thank you for listening. We will talk again soon.